This is the S2G podcast. I'm Tanya Beckritzes. In this episode, we're exploring the power of possibility with marine biologist, climate policy expert, and author, Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, nor should it be used to evaluate any investment or security. It is not directed at or intended for any current or prospective investor in any investment vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of capital. References to specific companies are for illustrative and educational purposes only and do not represent an endorsement or investment recommendation. The views expressed by podcast guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of S2G. For additional important information, please visit s2ginvestments.com/disclosures.
I don't want people to quit. And so if we're not going to quit, then it's like, all right, what are the possibilities available to each of us? And I hope that more and more entrepreneurs and investors, and especially people in media, will start telling more of those stories of what getting it right looks like in their fields.
Too often, climate conversations focus on doom and gloom, leaving us feeling helpless or defeated. But what if we spent more time exploring what it would look like if we got it right? In this episode, Ayana Elizabeth Johnson sits down with Chuck Templeton to discuss why shifting mindsets from one of sacrifice to one of opportunity is essential for driving the implementation and impact of climate solutions. Ayana has dedicated her career to bridging the gap between climate science, policy, and communications. Her most recent book, What If We Get It Right? Visions of Climate Futures, uses a blend of interviews, essays, and art to imagine a world where climate solutions lead to better environmental and human outcomes. As Ayana emphasizes, the future is not set in stone. There are countless futures that offer real benefits both now and in the long run. We have the tools to make these visions a reality. We just need the will to implement them. In this episode, Ayana shares how anyone can tap into this mindset to build resilient, impactful solutions. From creating a Climate Venn Diagram to working on a local level and reframing issues in ways that cut through jargon and resonate more widely, Ayana offers practical strategies to fuel change. At the end of the episode, we put this approach into practice by asking our entrepreneurs to share their visions for a better climate future. This is an energizing and practical conversation on how to approach climate work with passion and purpose. So let's get into it.
So I'm delighted to be here today with Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. So welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
So you have an incredible background, extremely extensive. Could you start off with giving us a little bit of insight as to your background and what you've done?
Who the heck am I?
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm a girl from Brooklyn, New York, who fell in love with the ocean as a little girl on a family trip to Florida. Decided I wanted to be a marine biologist, was like one of the kids stubborn enough to actually do it, and then realized the ocean was threatened by overfishing, pollution, climate change, coastal development, and decided I wanted to help do something about it. So yeah, I did a PhD in marine biology, always with an interest in policy change that was grounded in science. And over the last 15 years now, since I finished my PhD, I've been moving more and more from ocean science to policy to communications, and really focusing more and more on climate as opposed to fisheries management or marine protected areas. And I miss all the time I spent in the Caribbean, but I do feel like now's the perfect time for Americans to be focused on helping America get it together. So here we are.
That's great.
I became a writer somewhere along the way, which was not part of the plan. But if you want to communicate to people,
Yes.
It's helpful.
Yeah. And so was there anything in particular about marine biology that sort of pulled you in? Or
I mean, the ocean is rad. Have you seen the ocean? It's good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's easy to love. And I think kids have this incredible immediate connection with nature because they're so uninhibited. They're just like, this is awesome. Tell me more. Whether it's ants or shooting stars or dinosaurs or whatever. And so my particular version of that was the ocean, and coral reefs in particular. But I thought about going into forestry. I'm really interested in forest ecology, and wetlands are cool. And who doesn't love a field of wildflowers? So it's just this love of all the other species that we have the honor of sharing this planet with, and figuring out what it looks like to be a good citizen of planet Earth, for our species to be a good neighbor.
So this is really a joy, because I listen to audiobooks when I run a lot, and I get to run in the redwoods out here in California.
What a treat to get to run in the redwoods.
Yeah.
I might be a runner if there were redwoods near me.
Yeah, it's super fun. And I'm remembering hearing your voice, because I've listened to your book twice now. And so You've got a book called What If We Get It Right? Visions of Climate Futures. And it's a series of interviews that you did. And so what was the inspiration around that? And how did you think about the different topics that you were going to cover, the people you're going to work with?
Yeah, it's funny. People who've heard my voice but not really met me are like, oh, you sound just like you sound. I'm surprised it's not a radio voice. It's just me. I was trained as a jazz singer growing up in New York City, and sang in clubs when I was growing up, and in bands and stuff, not professionally, just with my family friends. So all I have left to show for all those years of jazz vocal training is a decent radio voice. But the book has a playlist in the back, the Anti-Apocalypse Mixtape, as an attempt to make a musical segue back to the book. But I really thought about it as the book that I wish that I had earlier in my career, in the sense that so much of the communication about climate is about the problems, like describing the pending apocalypse in detail. And I find that to be really demotivating, and oftentimes not that useful. I think once you have a baseline information of, oh shit, climate change, then the question can very quickly become, okay, what do we do about it? If we take giving up off the table, if we take quitting and going to Mars off the table, then what is left for us to do? And this question, what if we get it right, has just been so animating for me to think about all the different paths forward. But I came up with the title of the book, What If We Get It Right? Visions of Climate Futures, as the subtitle. And then I was so intimidated by the title of my own book that I couldn't write it, because who am I to, as a singular person, attempt to answer that question? And so I realized that what I needed to do was talk to my friends. I was going to read everyone's books and interview a lot of people, and then paraphrase it, and realize I don't like those books. I'd rather just hear from people directly. So it's a bit unconventional in a way, but it is 20 transcribed interviews, along with essays by me, and poetry and quotations and original art. And so it's an anthology of sorts. But yeah, my voice is certainly the through line, introducing all of these luminaries who are forging the path towards solutions, from people in finance like Regine Clement of Creo Syndicate, to farmers like Leah Penniman and Brian Donahue, to tech executives like Microsoft's head of AI, Mustafa Suleiman, to community organizers like Colette Pichon Battle and Jade Begay, an Indigenous leader, to heads of nonprofits and lawyers, and the curator of art and design at the MoMA, Hollywood executives, all of these different vantage points for helping us to understand the changes that we need to make. Journalism as well is in there, because the Hollywood executives were like, we can't get it right until the news gets it right, so that the people greenlighting these movies understand what's actually happening. And so it was really such a delight to get to have these deep conversations with this huge variety of experts. And these are people, in many cases, I've known for years, if not a decade or more. Bill McKibben, I've known him since my junior year of college, when he came to teach a seminar course at Harvard. And so it was really a delight to get to have these conversations, which are, you've listened to it, so I'm curious if this rings true to you, but my favorite response to the audiobook version, people hearing all these voices, was that it felt like they were eavesdropping on a dinner party. There's a friendliness to it, because these are in many cases my actual friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of things, obviously, but what I really did appreciate is how certainly you could tell you'd done your research and each of these people that you wanted to talk to and had an existing relationship with them, as you were saying, because it felt like, I don't know, in Hollywood, did they call it a one take, where it's like one take throughout a big long scene or whatever? Because it did feel like this was a natural conversation between you and your guests. But the questions were, I'm sure there was some editing and that kind of stuff, but you didn't go back.
Oh, there was so much editing. These were like 2-hour conversations, 50-page transcripts that were cut down to 15, 20
But it was
pages.
Single takes, though. It wasn't like you then went back 2 weeks later and got a second take and then a third take or whatever on it.
You get one try.
Yeah, so it was really good. And just like the idea of moving from what's the problem to what's the solution, that's a sort of what if we get it right? And so what have you seen change since you've written this book? And where is some of this starting to percolate into conversations? Because I've got a couple ideas, but I want to hear what you've seen.
This book was written in 2023, 2024, published in September 2024. Part of me, after the last few months, was thinking, like, is this book naive, given that the policy landscape has changed? But I've actually reread the book because I was looking for typos because the paperback's coming out in September. And so much of it really is about federal policy is necessary, useful, an accelerant, etc. But so much of this book is about what can be done outside of this system, what role businesses can play, what role household and communities can play, the role that local governments can play, which have a much closer sense of responsibility to their constituents. And so I was relieved that it still holds.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it does feel like that community and the local collaboration and just the things that are happening on the ground, that does seem to be where we have the most momentum. So how could we do this then? Because we are where we are now. So what are some steps individuals can take?
The midterms are coming up quick. What are some steps we can take?
Yeah. How do we mobilize right now then?
I think it depends who the we is, because the answer will be different for you than for me and for various people listening. The question of what we do depends on where you have influence and power and networks. One of the most important things individuals can do is make sure their money is not funding the climate crisis. There's resources like bankforgood.org where you can find out about which banks have cleaner options, and greenportfolio.com for the investment side for individuals. And there's some research showing that where your money is actually matters more than your diet, because you're actually like funding expansion of the problem. So I'd encourage folks to look into that. But also in the town where I live, my mother has been going to the town council meetings and the planning board meetings. Yeah. And you actually have a lot of influence at that level, right? If your town is thinking about how to expand and build more housing, where is that going to happen? How are we thinking about protecting nature and wildlife corridors? And do we have enough drinking water for the capacity of housing that we're wanting to add? And all of those things are things citizens can bring up. And there aren't often PhD experts in these topics in your town council. They're just your neighbors trying to figure it out. So it really matters if you show up, even just with questions, if you don't have solutions. So I've been really thinking about and encouraging people to act locally, where all of us have power, as my generic answer. And then, of course, what each of us can do individually. I offer this tool of a Climate Venn Diagram, which came about because I was getting more and more people asking me what they could do. And I didn't know how to answer them, because I didn't want to give them this generic, this common list of vote, donate, spread the word, lower your carbon footprint, protest. It just didn't feel adequate. And I do all those things. And I would encourage everyone to do those things, but that seems like the baseline. And I realized that I was having all these conversations and then thinking, I don't know, what are you good at? What do you want to do? And is there a way you can do that in service of the climate work that needs doing? I encourage people to really look for the intersection of 3 circles. What are you good at? What work needs doing? And what brings you joy? Really think about what levers they specifically can pull as part of an organization, within the companies where they're already working, within their communities, whatever spheres of influence they have and expertise they have to offer. Are you an artist? Are you a lawyer? Are you a project manager? Are you someone who's extremely cool? What are you bringing to the table? And encouraging people to lean into their strengths in that way. So this Venn diagram is, what are you good at? Your skills, your resources, your networks. Obviously, if you've got a bunch of money, that's a very different scenario with what you should be doing on that side of things than if you're an artist who's like, all I have to give you is this like incredible design sense that I have. I'm like, great, because we need that too. Because we also need all this work to look good and be appealing and welcome people in. That's my little tangent. I've been doing more work in the arts these days. So what are you good at? What needs doing? There are hundreds of climate solutions out there. So pick one or two to work on. And then what brings you joy? Because we have to have some sense of satisfaction in our work in order to keep going for the rest of our lives. This is sort of like a simplified climate version of Ikigai, the Japanese concept for finding your purpose that some might be familiar with.
Yeah.
So it's a little unsatisfying an answer. It requires people to do a little homework of their own.
Yeah, for sure. And no one said this is going to be easy, right? But as we look at this, we believe that we're obviously taking a capitalistic approach to this. And we think that there's opportunities to actually create solutions that are better than the conventional solutions now that have positive climate and human outcomes, things around how bankable renewable energy is now compared to what it was 15, 20 years ago, and wasn't the cheapest electrons you can bring on the grid. And now it is, right? And so we do believe that this is a pause or a slowing, but that the momentum is still in not everything, certainly, but is dramatically in the direction of the everyday business, that there is better alternatives out there that are coming to scale, that do have the benefit of being better for people, being better for the planet. We're not seeing that there's a slowdown in ideas or in energy to start organizations, but there's enough understanding that more businesses that are being started today have this integrated into the DNA than don't, if you will. It's a matter of time, but structurally, we're continuing to see that shift of how do we do things that actually do have a better outcome for people on the planet. I know that's been our set of experiences.
I'm very glad that's
recently.
What you're seeing. And you'd certainly know better than I. The thing that I'm worried about is that so much of what I think inspired businesses to think about clean energy and sustainability practices more generally was consumer demand. It was a response to the public. And if that demand signal weakens, I think the motivation for executives who are trying to do hard things, right, with tight margins, they may prioritize environmental aspects less. I think, like you said, the finances make sense for solar energy, for example, and increasingly wind. So on the just electrons side of things, sure. But as far as overall business practices, the more there's a clear consumer preference and ideally some amount of willingness to pay for the cleaner, more environmentally friendly option, that will certainly make a huge difference.
So given the situation we're in and where we are, and obviously the things that have happened over the last few months, is there common issues that we can maybe lean into more to get momentum? Are there certain areas where it's maybe a language issue rather than a policy issue, sustainability versus conservation? Are there areas where it might be easier to start in these times?
One of the things I've learned recently just from the polling data is that a topic that there's the most support for across the political spectrum is just clean water. That everyone thinks that we should have clean water, that everyone has a right to clean water.
Yeah.
This sense that like water is actually a thing that connects us all and a good place to start. And so the more we can, I think, go back to fundamentals like that, I think that's really helpful. And there's certainly a debate happening within climate circles right now. Do we even need to keep talking about climate change, or can we just talk about clean energy and the jobs associated with that, and manufacturing and battery plants that are starting up and all of this good progress that's being made? And I teach climate communications at Bowdoin College. But I think a lot about the words that we use to describe what we're doing and how much that matters in shaping that narrative. And I think we're definitely in a choose your battles moment, right? If you can get people to agree on clean air, like maybe we don't need to talk about greenhouse gas emissions all the time. We can just talk about pollution because that's what greenhouse gases are. So I think there's actually a lot that people can get behind together in terms of responding to extreme weather. I always remind people that it's extreme weather fueled by climate change. Others are welcome to omit that and think about, okay, well, how do we just deal with it? Because it's here, right? The droughts, the floods, the wildfires, the sea level rise, the hurricanes, no matter whether you understand the science or not, it's happening. And so I do think that is an interesting opening for collaboration. As I said, this is affecting everyone in every congressional district. We need to figure out how to take care of each other. And after a disaster is when people come together in remarkable ways. And of course, we all wish it didn't take that to support our neighbors, but we're really good at coming together and helping people in these times of need. And so there's an interesting, I don't want to call it an opportunity, but there's something there to be sure. And the more we think about what we can do locally, the more we can just move past a lot of the politics and just think about protecting the places and the people that we love.
Yeah. And to me, this goes back to your whole framing of what if we get it right? Because I think there's a perception that all this is a sacrifice. And I think that there are ways, certainly, that it's more beneficial. We're healthier, we live longer, we don't have storms destroying our neighborhoods and communities as much. And so there's a way to continue to lean into the idea of possibility. And that's why your book should resonate with more people right now, because it is about like the good things that come out of this. And so I don't know, that to me, like there is a leaning into that positioning that I just think is super important now. And as I look at a lot of the content we put out, I do think about that as to how do we think about what are the right opportunities, that it is aspirational for people rather than the reality is, yes, there's some scary stuff on the horizon that we've got to be, but there's also some great
serious
things if we get it
headwinds,
right.
But yeah, the word that you used was possibility. This is one of my favorite words. I'm not an optimist. I'm very much a realist, a scientist, but there's so many different possible futures. And there's so many solutions we could be deploying. We could be going so much more quickly with this clean energy transition, this transition to more regenerative agriculture, right? There's so much possibility. Like the future is not yet written. And I think about that all the time, right? How can each of us be part of creating the best possible climate future? And sometimes I think a more honest title for the book would be, what if we get it as right as possible? Like it's not going to be an A+, but I'll take a B. A B+ would be great. And I think that's really the opportunity, is if we think about the climate challenge as this spectrum from 0 to 100, apocalypse or paradise, or how close to 100 can we get? It's not binary. There's a lot of people who want to just give up because it seems too hard, but there really are hundreds of millions of lives that hang in the balance. So I don't want people to quit. And so if we're not going to quit, then it's like, all right, what are the possibilities available to each of us? And I hope that more and more entrepreneurs and investors, and especially people in media, will start telling more of those stories of what getting it right looks like in their fields, so that we can have this virtuous cycle of inspiring each other in this effervescent sense of possibility that sparks the joy, the motivation we need to keep at it, because it's not going to be easy. But I don't think that the frame of sacrifice is really helpful. I'm actually surprised at how often people think of dealing with climate change as a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And not because things aren't going to change, but there's this underlying assumption in that framing that things are great right now. And they're not.
Yeah.
Like we don't have clean air and clean water in many places. We don't have lots of good jobs in the clean energy economy that we could have. We don't have hundreds of thousands of people protecting and restoring ecosystems as their work and absorbing more carbon. And we don't have healthy food for most people from farms that are following ecological practices. All of these things are not great as the status quo. There is a loneliness epidemic in this country. There's huge poverty problems in this country. And so when we think about having to give things up, yes, it's always a cost benefit of like, but what do you get from it? And I think the answer is obvious that addressing the climate crisis gives us a much better future, but also gives us a much better present. There are so many immediate benefits for our health, for ecosystems, for all of it. But we really need to think about how to change the systems that are undergirding all of this so that we have the options of making all these better decisions, right? Like I lived in a studio apartment in New York City for a bunch of years and I couldn't put solar panels on the roof, even if I had the money, right? I didn't own the building. Yeah. And so making sure that people have the options is a big part of it.
Yeah. And I think we look at it. So like we have a company that electrifies trucking and it's actually a better driving experience for the operator.
Are awesome.
There's no diesel particulates polluting the neighborhood. It's actually a cheaper cost of ownership. It's just a win-win-win. And now those are the types of opportunities that I think aren't about sacrifice. They're actually about what's the possibility there and how do we make something that's actually better than the conventional in all these aspects, whether it's cost, performance, health.
Paris just took cars out of their city and the air quality is like dramatically better. Like you can see the Eiffel Tower better, right?
Yeah.
There's just a bonus in the near term for so much of this stuff, like you were saying.
Yeah, a lot of it for sure. So as we finish this up, I'd love to hear, so if you had to go to that place of discomfort, what gives you some hope? And we've talked a lot about the challenges, but what gives you some hope?
I'm not into hope. I'm like, what's the strategy? What's the plan? What are we doing? Because as we've been discussing, there's no end to the solutions. It's really just a matter of like how quickly we're going to do this stuff. And so, yes, I prefer the word possibility to hope, and that's semantic to some people, fine. But a world where we have clean air and clean water is possible. A world where we have clean energy and good food is possible, right? A world where people have good jobs is possible. Something that's has huge support across the political spectrum is we don't want to waste anything. Like waste is bad, right? And so what does that mean from an environmental lens? To be frugal with the planet, to be thoughtful about all of these things. Like, you guys, this world is just better. Like electric cars are just like much more fun to drive. But also like high-speed trains, I would much rather have access to that than have to drive a car for long distances. I find it a really helpful baseline to just remind myself that we have the solutions we need. We don't actually have to wait for innovation. Innovation is still happening. We don't need to like wait for some magical thing to happen. We just have to get to it with deploying all of this. Catch the photons, catch the wind.
Yeah.
Heal the soil, all of that, plant some trees. It's actually super basic. It's very complicated in the details, but fundamentally, we know exactly what we have to do.
Yeah, agree. And yeah, we don't see there's a technical gap to getting it done. It's just a matter of like building whatever the business model innovation or the infrastructure to go make it all happen.
And I'm so grateful for the work you all are doing to help accelerate all of these solutions and just support the business case and the actual businesses doing this stuff.
Yes.
It's just a critical part of the solutions ecosystem. So thank you.
Inspired by Ayana's focus on solutions, we wanted to take a page from her book and explore what might be possible with some of the companies we're invested in. We just wrapped up our annual summit, and we took the opportunity to ask a few of our company leaders what their vision for an ideal climate future would look like within their industries and how they view their own climate Venn diagrams. Here are some of their responses.
My name's Cody Finke. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Brimstone. Brimstone is developing a rock refinery to produce multiple products, including decarbonized cement and smelter-grade alumina from the most abundant rock on Earth. A climate positive future in the building materials industry is much more efficient in terms of both CO2 and material utilization. Right? So our vision is to use the most abundant rock on Earth so we can disturb the least sensitive places on Earth. And we mine about 4 times less rock overall compared to conventional production processes, so we just do much less disturbing of the environment in general. And regardless of the energy that's available, be lower CO2 emissions so that we can start scaling quickly. So basically, we can make the materials we need to build the world without the CO2 impact anywhere we want with very little environmental impact in terms of both rock mined and CO2 produced. Our material is exactly the same as conventionally produced material, and that's important because we don't know how other materials perform in the long term, and we don't want buildings to fall down. The only difference is that our material is at lower cost, and so it is more abundant and cheaper for everyone to build the structures we need. As we bring people out of poverty, they're going to need to build homes and buildings and everything, and the cheaper those things are, the faster people can get out of poverty. I'm really good at developing frameworks for solving problems that are consistent with the laws of physics. What needs doing is overhauling just about every industrial process on Earth. What brings me joy really is problem solving.
Bert Nikens. I am with Orange EV, and I am one of the co-founders. Orange EV builds all-electric Class 8 port trucks and warehouse semi-tractors that move trailers around the shipping yard. I think the biggest impact is on the drivers themselves. We find the truck's the truck of choice, as we say, and so a lot cleaner, a lot less vibration, a lot less heat, and so the drivers go home healthier every night, but then over the long term also. And I think that's a major impact. And then the companies save up to $500,000 over a 10-year period per truck without any incentives. And so if you think about how many times your packages, the things you buy, get moved from one building to the next in a warehouse, each of those moves costs money. And so when you save money on every move you make, that can make an impact on not only just your personal pocketbook, but the whole kind of GDP of the country. And then I think just being able to breathe better is kind of an important thing. And so climate change and reducing those emissions while saving money, while making it better, is kind of fun to do. I love to create, for sure. This gets very esoteric, but I love to create and I love base state. There's a lot of people run companies with fear-based motivations, and I think that we get a lot more done, we're a lot more creative, and it's a lot more fun if we do it without fear-based motivation. So that doesn't mean we don't get afraid sometimes, but trying to lean that way as much as we can is a big part of that kind of confluence of what we do. But creating something that is better in every way is a challenge that is fun to bring all the pieces together. So that's been fun for me.
My name is Karen May. I am part of the founding team and the CFO of XOCEAN. So we collect and deliver ocean data, and traditionally that data is collected using a large research vessel with huge crews on board and huge environmental emissions. We collect the same data using an uncrewed surface vessel or a marine robot. So we collect the exact same data as traditional vessels, but with 1,000 times less emissions than research vessels. And so it's a greener, more sustainable environment. 70% of our work is also for clean tech. So it's in the offshore renewables, carbon capture and storage, etc. So again, a greener, more sustainable environment. We're able to mobilize and deploy our vessels really quickly and easily. We can ship them or air freight them across the world. Large research vessels tend to be more regionalized, so it's very difficult. If there's an issue with a wind farm in the UK and you've got a vessel in Norway to get there, we can get our vessels there really quickly, get the turbines up and running as quickly as possible. So really efficient, cost effective and environmentally friendly. I have spent my career working primarily in renewables and in new tech, and the XOCEAN story is amazing. We've grown, scaled so quickly over the last 5 years. We have a product offering that is just hugely in demand, and it is delivering a sustainable future, and working with a team that I've worked with for the last 15, 20 years. So absolute joy every day. So it's great.
My name's Jasmine Hume. I'm the founder and CEO of Shiru. Shiru has created an AI-driven discovery engine for natural ingredients for food, cosmetics, and agriculture. There's so many opportunities for us to use technology that enables better products. We think about products that are better for people, healthier, more clean label, including things that are like really easy to recognize on the ingredients label, and products that are equally beneficial for the planet. We believe that the way to transition towards that future where we have products that are nourishing people, nourishing the planet, is by using advanced technologies. Shiru, we're using artificial intelligence and we're using biotechnology, very similar technologies to what have been used in the drug discovery space, and we're deploying those towards creating better natural ingredients. I love, first of all, solving hard problems. I have a technical background, and so thinking about like how do we use biology, chemistry, AI to solve problems that are really, really big and scary is not intimidating to me. It actually like energizes me in a really amazing way. And using that background for myself, I want to put my energy towards solving what I view as the biggest problem that humanity has to solve now, which is climate, and how we are going to adapt and become more resilient to be able to overcome these massive obstacles that are heading towards us very, very quickly, if not here already.
My name is Charlie Anderson, and I am the CEO of a company called Burrow. We at Burrow build a product creatively called Burrow. Think Disney's WALL-E for work outdoors in a 1.0 format, which more practically is a vision-based autonomous ground vehicle that collaborates with people to enhance their productivity in places like nurseries, vineyards, berries, and beyond. We used to do things like towing, mowing, spraying, carrying, patrolling. I think the future is going to be wild, and in my view, I'm definitely an optimist in terms of where the world is going. I think that there's a ton of human creativity, and that if you're building a tool such as a Burrow that augments people, you can't fully predict exactly what people are going to do with it. And so said another way, we build something, it's almost like a guitar. You kind of build a guitar and you're expecting, hey, someone's going to play it in this exact way. And they suddenly are coming up with like ska and slide guitar and a million other things. And so to unpack it a bit further, I think that robots are going to be collaborating with people for a long period of time. I think robots and electrification go hand in hand, and robots are ultimately a path towards a much cleaner world that is, I would argue, much better for people. So I grew up on a working fruit and vegetable farm. My dad growing up was incredibly successful as an entrepreneur, and then when he was around 57, he got diagnosed with Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's, which is just like triple whammy. And early on, he sprayed a lot of things like glyphosate, 2,4-D, or Roundup, like that category of things. And I do think that there's something around people and their chemistry that probably we should move away from. And so in my view, autonomy is pulling people away from things that might be harmful to them, and also freeing people to do more impactful work. So robots should be spraying, they should be mowing, they should be patrolling, they should be doing things that people don't have to do, so people can do higher value stuff while also having a cleaner, better world.
Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2ginvestments.com.